I call on the report of the Special Commission on the ethics of investment. But before I do, I just want to say a couple of words. It's Saturday afternoon. Folk are getting tired. This is important. The ethics of how we spend our money. Jesus talked more about our money than anything else in the Gospels. So let's take a deep breath, get some energy, and hear this report. I call on the convener.
Good afternoon, everybody. Val Brown, convener. Moderator, when the five of us that comprise the Special Commission were tasked with this role 2 years ago, I think we all felt that we'd taken on something of a poisoned chalice. The task seemed so enormous, and we could very easily have spent the 2 years just trying to come up with a working definition of the term ethical, and we're still working on that. So instead, we threw ourselves into meetings to learn as much as we could about investment practice, ethical investment, its successes and limitations, what the church is currently doing, what other churches are doing, and to hear from people who wanted the church to be cautious and not risk income, and to hear from people who felt the church should be prophetic and take a lead in making sure that our money is as clean as possible. Clean being another word that we're still working on a definition of. And all of this before we even got to the thorny little issue of fossil fuels, which is what got us here in the first place. But as the moderator just said, what we do with our money is not a peripheral issue. It is a deeply spiritual issue, because at its heart, it portrays our values and priorities. As we know, the Bible has plenty to say about money, how we get it and how we use it. The prophet Amos castigates those who earn money at the expense of the poor, accusing them of skimping on the measure, boosting the price, and cheating with dishonest scales. A theme that is echoed by many of the prophets, and a theme that continues on to the New Testament. John the Baptist makes it clear that tax collectors should only take what is due to them. Jesus condemns the teachers of the law who take advantage of widows, and he saddens the rich young man by telling him that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. And then James has a few choice words for the rich landowners who have squirreled away their wealth while their workers are crying out because they haven't been paid their wages. How we acquire our money and what we do with it is in many ways central to our faith. And if things were difficult in biblical times, they're even more complex now. We live in a globalized world where companies can crisscross the globe to seek out and take advantage of cheap labour, non-unionised workforces, lax environmental controls and tax breaks. And while that brings us cheaper goods, it often brings misery and ruin to people and planet. The controls set up to regulate trade never envisaged globalised markets, which is one of the reasons that companies can so easily evade taxation. They merely shift location to low-tax jurisdictions to declare profit. In a world where people need jobs and governments need tax money to pay for essential services, how do we stop a race to the bottom in an attempt to attract global capital to invest? And how do we as a church invest in this space? Another question we had to consider was the relative merits of divesting from things we didn't like versus remaining invested and trying to influence from within. These conversations dominated the fossil fuel debates here in this hall in 2018 and 2019, and as such was an issue that we sought lots and lots of opinions on. It soon became clear that this was not a clear-cut issue. We've highlighted that in the report, the limitations of merely excluding things we don't like from the portfolio in the belief that we are then no longer invested in them. In reality, we are just not invested in any company that derives more than 15% of its revenue from that sector. So, for example, a company with a revenue of £20 billion, therefore, could still have £2.5 billion worth of revenue coming from something that we didn't like, because that's less than 15% of their total revenue. Exclusions, therefore, are a fairly blunt instrument. Similarly, if there are things we don't like, we also need to think about who is financing them and are we invested in them. So at the moment, we are not directly invested in any fossil fuel company, but we are invested in one of the biggest backers of fossil fuel development. So does the exclusion of fossil fuels make our portfolio green? And let's add that word to the to-be-defined list. And what about engagement? We heard that selling shares makes no material difference to a company. When we sell them, somebody else buys them. A company is not harmed by us not investing in them. Potentially reputationally damaged, but not financially. And as long as we are invested, then we can exercise an influence via voting. Now, let's be very clear on this. We have a vote proportionate to the size of our investment and usually done on our behalf by investment managers who are voting on behalf of all of their clients. In theory, that means that we add weight to a group of like-minded people, but it's also not unusual for an investment manager to cast votes both ways, depending on the views of their many, many clients. There is no scope for people in this assembly hall to sit across the table from company directors and have a one-to-one conversation, unless, of course, you have personal links that we don't know about. The Presbyterian Church in the United States of America, the PCUSA, is investing around 10 times much money as we are, and they find engagement difficult. Which is why they choose to engage with companies across a number of issues only for as long as they see progress. When they feel that they are not making any perceivable difference, they move to disinvest. And does engagement work? Some companies have made great strides in improving practices across a number of metrics: human rights, environmental concerns and governance. And so there is evidence that active engagement can be useful, and indeed the Investors' Trust, COSIT, has been involved with broad church alliances on anti-trafficking work that has made progress in getting companies to be more accountable for their supply chains. There are companies that used to derive most of their revenue from oil and gas, but have transitioned towards renewables. And then there are those that have merely paid lip service to changing practices. A blunt exclusion on any sector fails to allow for these nuances. I hope I've managed to paint you a picture of both how interesting this is and how complex. And the Church's finances. The majority of the Church of Scotland investments are looked after by COSIT, that was set up by an Act of Parliament and therefore not bound by the General Assembly. COSIT are bound by trust law. That means they need to be responsible for the Trust's assets. Normally, that means an investment is there in order to provide good financial returns, but can do so in keeping with the Trust's aims and values. So what about ethical investment? What we found when we spoke to people about ethical investment was a broad assumption that if we were to be more ethical, we would lose money. Now, with all the usual small print caveats of investments can go up as well as down, and past performance is not indicative of future performance, we didn't come across any evidence of that being the case. We didn't speak to any church body who had lost income in order to be more ethical. We did hear from people who were investing slightly differently and had specifically recruited investment managers who were able to deliver against more stringent ethical criteria. So where did all of this get us to? When we met with Faith Invest, an organisation set up to support the rapidly developing movement of faiths actively using their investments to create a better world for people and planet, I think we had a bit of a light bulb moment. They were proposing a structure that other churches had tried or are in the process of trying, and that wasn't dissimilar to what we'd heard about from the PCUSA. And as soon as we met with them, I approached COSIT and told them that I thought we might just have cracked a way to work through this together in a way that moved the conversation forward without impinging on their role as trustees. And I want to say thanks to Robert and COSIT for being willing to work with us and to have both challenging and constructive conversations with us. What we're proposing to you today is the creation of an Ethical Oversight Committee, the EOC, that will be made up of 9 people, 3 from COSIT, 1 from the General Trustees, then 5 appointed by the Assembly Nominations Committee, 3 of whom would have a knowledge of social justice, world church issues, 1 would be a parish minister, and 1 would be aged 30 or under at the point of their first appointment. That committee will be a space for intelligent and honest conversation around the kind of issues I've highlighted to you today and the ones that are in the report. It is a committee to support COSIT as they work with investment managers, and it's a place to locate the conversations that the Church needs to have. It's probably fair to say that heated debates on the floor of the Assembly are useful for getting issues to the fore, but less useful at pinning down the actual practical working out of what to do about them. The EOC is envisaged as a place where these conversations can be fleshed out and the pros and cons considered. The EOC will have no voting power, they will be purely advisory in nature, and the legal fiduciary role of the COSIT trustees will not be affected at all by the creation of this group. Faith Invest have generously given their services to us free of charge over the last year and 18 months, and our proposal is that we work with them and ask them to facilitate the creation and setting up of the group, work with them to support COSIT to come up with a very clear statement of the Church's values that would then act as the basis of what would be used to brief investment managers. The cost of this is in the region of £7,000 to £10,000, dependent on how much time the new chair of the EOC can give to the process. And we're very grateful that Faith Action have agreed to find budget for this. The creation of this group is by no means a solution in and of itself. A speaker at a recent Global Ethical Finance Initiative conference was very clear that substantive changes come about because of changes in government policy. If we want real change to happen, then companies and governments must be held accountable. Investors play one part in that process. The Church has a voice in society that it can use to lobby for change, whether that is for fair wages, the paying of taxes, incentives for the renewable sector, adherence to the Paris protocols, or speaking out against sweatshop labour. The journey for justice goes on. And I want to thank everybody on the Special Commission, as a member, as a staff support, because the last couple of years have been interesting but hard work. And thanks also to everyone who took the time to speak with us, email us, or read and comment on drafts of the report. And I'm very pleased to stand here and say that the recommendations and deliverances of this report have been agreed by both COSIT and Faith Impact Forum. Moderator, I'm not a commissioner, so can I ask the Principal Clerk, please, to move the deliverance?
I so move the deliverance.
Seconded.
Thank you. Questions for the convener?
Rennick 239. In section 3 of the deliverance, you instruct the forming of the committee, which I think is a really great idea. You ask for the 5 General Assembly appointed members to come through the nomination committee. So I'm asking the question as the convener of nomination committee, when? Do you want them to start work this year? Or do you want to wait a year? Because nomination process closes on Thursday. If we nominate during this week, etc.
Okay. I believe the convener of the
My understanding is that the General Assembly nomination process would mean that because it's been called during this Assembly, it would be the selection committee.
Okay, that's
and
perfect.
The selection committee is certainly, well, they've been given the heads up that if this is agreed, that's a task.
That's grand, that's fine.
Well, we haven't got a selection committee
Not yet.
No, no. But we will hear about that on Monday. But
We
it
will
would
do
be
on
the
Monday. Okay.
selection
Okay, thank you.
committee.
Thank you, Don. That's very helpful. So it will go through the selection committee, which will be selected on Monday. Great. Okay. Other questions? Comment. So I'll take questions first. If there are no other questions, then I'm happy to. Is there another question? Sorry. Oh. Okay. We're all. Okay, before we take a comment, let's go to section 1, though, receive the report. Are we happy to receive the report? Thank you. And thank you, Principal Clark.
Johnston 386. Moderator, as we've heard, the Faith Impact Forum is very supportive of what is here. So just declaring interest as a Vice Convener of the Faith Impact Forum, but I'm speaking on my own behalf here. And as somebody who has participated in some of the debates that we've had in the past, I just give my thanks to all of you on the Commission for the work that you've done. It's very easy to get up and you kind of know something needs to change, something needs to happen, but you don't know what the detail of that's going to be. And you have fleshed out that detail so well for us. And I really thank you for that. And I encourage everyone to support the sections of deliverance. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. Okay, we move to section 2. Agree the recommendations in section 11.
And online.
And online? Okay, thank you. Section 3. And, okay, hang on. Great, okay. Section 4. And online, thank you. And section 5. And online, thank you. I'll get this, I will. And the deliverance as a whole. Great, thank you. Thank you, Special Commissioner. I have to say, the work that you have done is extraordinary. And you started from a very nebulous, could you please come and explore this? And you've come back with some really solid ways forward. So thank you very much to the Special Commission. And I would ask that your convener come for a minute. Val, what a power of work you and the Special Commission have done for us. Because behind the report shared today came research, collaborations, and explorations with internal groups in the Church of Scotland and numerous discussions with external experts who could help navigate the complexities of ethical investment. Your fellow committee members echo what the team you now lead at Christian Aid know. You bring pragmatism, an analytical mind, a full life and a fabulous family that helps you keep the necessary perspective to keep going when the going gets tough. Deep experience with Christian Aid has grounded you in justice issues, tuned your ear to those living on the sharp edge of poverty and inequity, and you brought that with you to this task. A master's degree in international policy and diplomacy and a dissertation on tax justice probably didn't go amiss either. To you and your insightful, considered, and formidable committee, you have our thanks and our commitment as a General Assembly to taking this work forward. Thank you all, and you are excused and finished. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.